Welcome back to Disturbing the Priest. I'm your host, Brandon Battick, and today we are blowing smoke with Twisted Rico. I am joined here by the legendary Steev Riccardo. How's it going, man?
If we weren't in this smoke-free environment, I'd be lighting up right now and then really blowing some smoke, man.
Yeah, I'm. This is definitely not the plan. This is why I need a studio. We're here in the basement of a record store.
It's cool though, dude. It's cool. I mean, there's so much vinyl. Well, not in this room. This is all posters, but there's a lot of vinyl upstairs. I already have 3 records on hold.
We got the record store experience here. You got some records. You get the must. A little bit of a weed smell. Yeah, man. I wanted to do this outside and have some lawn chairs. Maybe roll a joint or something. I am.
The weather didn't cooperate.
Yeah. I'm holding maybe 5 pounds of water weight right now. After sprinting from the back to here.
I dried off. I was pretty wet before, but now I've dried off a bit.
It must be nice. My Vans are completely ruined.
Well, Vans
whatever.
are great, and I wear Vans all the time, but they're not good in the rain.
Not at all, but very breathable.
Yeah, I love Vans. I love Vans, but the rain, no.
Not at all. Well,
Doesn't
this was a long time coming, man, because I was on your show, and then I'm like, I'll get you on my show at some point, and then I had you do the demo episode.
Yeah, that was fun.
But that's not really an episode with you, So I'm like, all right, we're gonna do this outside thing. Maybe actually blow some smoke during it. But I think, you know what? I think this actually kind of worked out. I think this is a very fitting environment for the two of us to be right now.
My filter's not going to be any different than it would be outside
Yeah.
or with weed in me. Well, maybe with weed in me it might be a little looser, but
Yeah.
I have no secrets, Brandon.
I guess you don't. None at all.
It's rock and roll, man.
Rock and
It's
roll.
the life of rock and roll.
Well, you've done quite a lot in your life, man. We were talking about, because I'm going to L.A. in July, and you've done quite a lot in L.A.
Yeah.
From fucking Metal Blade. Most of your label work was in L.A., right?
L.A. and New York.
Yeah. Because you were transferred to New York, right?
Well, let me just tell you about this trajectory, because when
Yeah.
I tell people this, they're like, they're crazy. I went from Boston to L.A. to New York to L.A. to New York to Boston. And then after that, I lived in Arizona and Maine and Florida and Pennsylvania. But the label stuff was L.A. and New York. Although I did work for an independent label for a little time in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Get Hip Records.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but that was later on. But my early days were all L.A. and New York. I could tell you it was Enigma Records in L.A., it was Roadrunner in New York, it was Giant Records in New York, it was Metal Blade in L.A., and it was A&M Records, Third Stone Music actually, then A&M Records, both in... I was working at A&M in L.A., and I was really content working at Sunset and La Brea and going there every day. And then they're like, my boss, Richie Gallo, Steve, we're moving you to New York. It's a better job. Pack up. And, when a label does that, if you say no, chances are they'll say sayonara. So I kind of took the job in New York.
Yeah, how many labels? Because I always lose track. Because I'll be like, all right, he was at 4 labels, and then you list another one. I'm like, oh my god,
Excuse me.
Because Giant Records as well, which you.
It was Enigma.
Uh-huh.
It was Roadrunner, Metal Blade, Giant. Oh no, I'm sorry. I don't even know. It was Enigma, Roadrunner, Giant, Metal Blade, Third Stone, A&M, and then later on Get Hip. And I had my own label for a while called Red Car Records. That was in Boston. Yeah, that was a bad time to have a record label. It was 2003, and it was just. It was a nightmare. We just lost a lot of money because nobody wanted to buy CDs. We weren't making vinyl, and it was just a nightmare.
Any like notable bands on that?
Yeah,
label?
well, the Charms were on Red Car, and they ended up getting signed to Wicked Cool Records in New York. The Midnight Creeps, they did independent records. They're a really good punk band. The Esperantos from Detroit, Saginaw, Michigan, and Troy Gregory, who was in, you might know him from Prong,
Yeah.
and Flotsam and Jetsam. We did some of
Great
his
bands.
solo stuff, Troy Gregory and the Stepsisters. The problem was, though, it was the timing of the whole thing. There was a real dead area in the middle of the first 20 years of the 2000s. I don't even know what it's called. The 2010s. You know, it was like 2003 to 9. We tried really hard, but we couldn't keep it going, man.
Well, that was like the age of kind of like Napster and like illegal downloading.
Yeah, no one was buying physical at the time. It was all like digital. And vinyl had dropped all the way down. I think it was around 2000. It went all the way down to less than 1 million units sold.
Wow.
That's how bad it was.
That was probably like the lowest it ever has been, right?
Yeah, and now it's really made a huge comeback. In fact, vinyl, I think last I heard it was like close to 10 million.
Yeah.
But, you know, the funny thing about that, it was 25% of the vinyl sales, like in the last couple of years, have been Taylor Swift records. No lie.
Yeah, you got to have all the pressings of like it's so ridiculous now with like Taylor Swift, like she's putting out like 20 variants, you know, all these alternative releases.
Her fans are buying anything she puts out. She re-released her re-recorded her first 5 records and released them in more than one version, and guess what? They all sell.
Yeah, Taylor's version. I feel like some of the highest selling artists just are just doing it all wrong. Like I feel like Taylor, like it's just completely like it's overproducing, I think, making all these variants that don't need to exist. I'm not sure if you've kept up with Billie Eilish's new record, but she used recycled wax, and it sounds awful, I've heard.
It sounds awful?
Oh, yeah.
Well, she actually railed on the artists without mentioning Taylor Swift's name about that. There's a whole article about her saying she didn't like the fact that these artists were putting out different versions of their records, you know? And you know what's really funny, Brandon? When I worked for labels back in the old days, you know, Enigma days, and we never released colored vinyl. We just didn't do it. And it wasn't until I got to Giant where we did some different colored vinyl there. Like Government Issue came out on white vinyl, Verbal Assault came out on red vinyl. But even me, I was just like, you know, just give me the black, you know.
I feel like it's just so iconic to have like a black, like vinyl. Like I've never gotten into like where it's like rainbow splattered, vomit colored. It's like I don't want any of that, you know. It's not. I'm not hanging up the vinyl itself, you know. It's like, and I feel like the black, and you can see the dust on it. You know, I'm getting some of these variants.
I don't think they sound as good either.
Well, it's the same. Shit,
that's
right?
A psychological thing.
Yeah, it's like what is that called? Where like the doctor will give you like a pill that doesn't do anything. It's like it cures the headache, and you take it. It's like, oh, I'm cured. You know?
I've got a little spoiled by the 180 gram records. You know, the thicker ones, they seem to sound better. Back in the old days, anything that came out in Japan was really good. Japanese pressings. The U.S. always does it on the cheap in so many ways, you know, and I'm more into the quality, you know, even though I'm buying some records upstairs that are like old beat up records before I leave here. That's more for nostalgia reasons, you know. I think I grabbed a Robin Trower, a Uriah Heep, and I can't remember what the third one was, but because I don't have those records, you know.
What Uriah Heep?
I don't even remember. It was one I didn't know. I didn't know the record. I'm not Are you a big Uriah Heep fan?
Kind of,
Were you stealing when you should have been buying? I don't know a lot about them. I know that they got a little wizardry going on in some of their records. David Byron.
Yeah, they're one of the like founders of like the genre of heavy metal. They're there with like Deep Purple, Black
Really?
Sabbath.
You put them that high on the list?
Oh yeah, like in terms of like inventing heavy metal.
What about Steppenwolf?
Yeah, it wasn't. I don't think it was as heavy as those three though.
Blue Cheer.
Blue Cheer's definitely up
just,
there.
Yeah, I always just say Sabbath and Deep Purple, but there are other bands that have had a lot to do with the early metal movement. You know,
it was for sure like Sabbath was the one. Without a doubt, Sabbath invented heavy metal because you had everything that aligned. Because like, as much as I want to like give Coven a lot of credit, I think Coven's a great band. I saw Jinx live a few months ago in Boston.
Wow,
sounded amazing, and it's like, wait, this band was from when?
Dude, can we just say what's? I thought I was cool today. We're gonna say something. I thought I was cool today because I had my Jeff Beck shirt on. You show up with a Candlemass shirt. You can't beat that. They were on Metal Blade for a little while. I got to meet those guys and see them live. They were great.
Yeah, you've met a lot of notable artists. You've met Mick Jagger. You've met Brian May.
It wasn't. I wasn't planning on meeting. Did I ever tell you the Mick Jagger story?
Never.
I was one day I was in my office in New York when I was working for A&M, and my boss Richie Gallo, rest in peace, called me and said, "Steve, I need you to go on the road." And he talked like that. He had a really graggly voice. I smoked a pack a day. I want you to go on the road with Bryan Adams because his manager keeps going out in stores and they can't find the greatest hits album anywhere. And I'm like, okay, this is a real big priority, I can tell. So I'm like, all right, when did me leave? He said, go tomorrow. There's like 4 or 5 shows in the South. I want you to go to all of them. Go to every record store in every city. And back then there were a lot of record stores. And if they don't have them, give them copies. So I had boxes of clean vinyl that I was giving away. CDs, actually, it was. Boxes of CDs, because this is like 94, so it was CDs. So I'm like, get off the phone, and I'm like, I didn't even know Bryan Adams was on tour. So I look through our tour schedules we have, and I look, and he's opening for the Stones. And then I was like really excited. So I got to go to Georgia Stadium in Atlanta, the War Memorial Stadium in Little Rock, the Houston Astrodome, talk about a big place, and the Cotton Bowl. And I saw Eric Johnson was on some of the shows as the opener.
Nice.
And then Bryan Adams and then the Stones every night. Well, the last night in Dallas, Bryan didn't see anyone backstage, so I never even saw Bryan until Dallas. My job was just go there. I had tickets and VIP, passes, but no Bryan, no meet and greets or anything like that, which is unusual because a lot of our artists did do meet and greets. So at the Cotton Bowl show, this DJ called Redbeard down in Dallas wanted to meet Bryan, and Bryan said, "I'll see Redbeard." So I got to go backstage there. So I'm standing in the doorway, and Bryan doesn't even really shake hands or nothing. He was kind of a dick, actually. And the band's all hanging around, and they're all, screwing around with their instruments or whatever, and I'm standing in the doorway. All of a sudden, everyone's looking in my direction, and I look, and right next to me is standing Mick Jagger. It was like looking at a statue or a painting. It was like, is that really Mick? And it was, and I looked right at him, and he looked at me, and we just said, "Hi, how you doing?" That was my meeting with Mick Jagger. It wasn't much more than that, but still, being this close to Mick Jagger was really amazing. Brian May, I did get to talk to. You mentioned him.
Yeah.
Robert Plant, too. I got to talk to Robert Plant. I met him at a comedy club.
No shit. Which one?
One of the L.A. comedy clubs. I went to a show. I don't
store?
remember who I saw or anything. I just remember being in the bathroom at the urinal and Robert Plant's doing his thing right next to me. And then some guy is next to another stall, and he goes up. he didn't wash his hands. Hey, and Robert Plant just looked at him and looked at his hand. And he goes, "No." It was really funny.
That's
And
so
then
funny.
Then I just told Robert Plant that Tangerine was one of my favorite songs. That's all I could think of.
That was one of the first songs I actually learned on guitar.
Led Zeppelin
Tangerine.
3.
Amazing, amazing. Zeppelin 3 is such an amazing acoustic record, but I do want to get back into that's so funny because it's like you're in the industry and it's like this is where I meet you at a comedy club.
Yeah,
in
that was
passing.
weird. That was one of the weirder ones because Brian May I met on the Queen Mary. They were having a party for the release of, I think it was the Miracle album. I don't think it was the last album.
Wow.
I think it was the Miracle because it was their first record on Hollywood Records when they signed that new deal because they were with Elektra for years in America. And I don't know what happened, but Hollywood, I guess Elektra didn't like that record. I know we talked about it on my show.
Yeah.
By the way, if you want to go listen to our Blowing Smoke with Twisted Rico, Brandon and I did a show, and we talked about, we ranked all the Queen records.
Amazing,
That was
amazing
awesome.
episode. Please check it out. That was so much fun, man.
The Queen fans love it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But that must have been great. Meeting
Oh yeah. So
Brian?
they decided to have a party on the Queen Mary. Freddie didn't come. It was just John, Roger, and Brian. And I was walking around the ship like everyone else. The band didn't play. It was just a listening party. But everyone in the L.A. music business was there, right? And I'm walking around, and there he is talking to some people. I'm like, might not ever get this chance again. So I moseyed over there, and I just stood there, and then he looked at me. He goes, "Hey," and I shook his hand, and I didn't know the weirdest thing came out of my mouth. I go, "I love 39." I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to say, man. I was just like in awe of my hero because he really is. Him and Jeff Beck are my two favorite guitar players.
Well, that's what's so weird about meeting like your heroes like that. Like not even meeting. Like I remember the first time I saw Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath. I've told you this. They're my favorite band.
I believe that.
And I remember the first time I saw Ozzy live, I was stunned because I always saw
it was the Aussie band.
it was the final tour. This was 2017 at Xfinity Center.
Who was the guitarist on that tour?
Tony Iommi.
Oh, you saw Sabbath.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah,
I'm
Let me think.
He's one of my top five. He's number 6 actually on my list. He's my 6th favorite guitar player.
You would know your list.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I after I get this point out, I definitely want to hear that.
I knew there were going to be lists involved. The only thing is when we do lists, I wish I had my computer in front of me. But
that's anytime.
Guitar players are easy though.
I feel
I even know who would have my second tier. Like Richie Blackmore is on my second tier. I mean, it's like I love guitar players. I love all instruments. I can give you my list in every instrument if you want. I didn't think we were going to go there, but we can go anywhere you want to go.
I feel like anytime we have microphones in front of us, it turns into that.
A list. People love lists, though. They do. People love it when you do that, and I do that a lot. I have a show that hasn't come out yet. Our favorite top 10 live albums.
You mentioned one to me earlier, which I definitely agree with you, is like one of the top ones, which I feel like not a lot of people talk about.
Oh, that wasn't on my. You're talking about Jay Giles
yeah,
Live.
I think that's a great album.
That was my friend Charles Rivers that did the show with me. He had Jay Giles on his list, but it's not that I don't think that's a great live album. I could name 50 great live albums. It just wasn't in my top 10.
I wouldn't put that in my top 10, but I think it's up there for sure.
I know one record we both have in our top 10, Live Killers.
Yeah.
That was number 1 on my list.
That's definitely a top 10 for me. For me, it has to be the Cramps have a great live album. It's the one where it's
you're the one that sent me that message. That's right. Someone had sent me a message. I must have told you. Didn't you send me a message, the Cramps, when I told you I was going to do a live show?
Yes. Yeah. That's
it could have been someone else, but I thought it was you.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite live. The Cramps, their live album is so fucking good. They cover Heartbreak Hotel in it. What's Inside a Girl's on it. Blue Moon Baby. It's such a good.
I didn't know you were that big of a Cramps fan.
I love the Cramps.
Psycho Billy.
Yeah, the one of my favorite compilations of all time. Bad music for bad people.
Oh yeah, IRS.
Like
right?
that might be IRS. Maybe one of the greatest names for a compilation of all time. IRS also put out to bring it back to Sabbath. They put out the Tony Martin records.
They did.
Yeah,
That's really,
I believe
I didn't know they did any
Forbidden,
metal records. Wow.
Yeah, Forbidden.
Now that I said that, there's
Forbidden,
probably
Cross
more.
Purposes. Headless Cross, I think, is on IRS. Yeah.
You just love talking about Tony Martin.
But yeah, man. What I was
going to say one other thing about the Cramps. They also had one of the best album titles ever, "Smell of Female." I just love that album. I love the title.
I do want to ask you something related to that.
I think it was a movie act. It came from a
Smell
movie.
of Female. That's
Yeah, it's
such
a movie.
funny
It
name.
was a movie. Roger Corman? Was it Roger Corman?
I don't know.
It was an old movie. I hate when I can't remember stuff.
Well, I do want to say because we were talking about the
Guitar players
and stuff, and when I saw Sabbath, seeing Ozzy there and seeing Iommi, because like, you know, when I was a kid listening to these bands, they've been on the radio since, you know, before I was born. It's like a part of me didn't even think they were real. They're like cartoon characters, you know. They're like these deities almost.
Yeah.
You know, so when you see Ozzy come out for the first time, it's like, holy shit, that's a real person, you know? It's not just, you know. So when I saw him, it was so amazing. But then, you know, the thing is, what's cool about doing like podcasts is you talk to some of these people that you love, and you're like, oh, they're just like one of us. You know what I mean? And that must have been so nice, meeting some of your heroes and talking to them and being like, oh, they're just people, you know, because you bring them up to be these gods.
And, you know, that goes for my podcast, too. I mean, I had Carlos Alomar on my show, David Bowie's guitar player and band leader for like 10 records. And I was really nervous, but, man, was he cool and down to earth. Also, Louise Post from Veruca Salt. I mean, I was really nervous to talk to Louise, but she was very... Kira Rossler from Black Flag. Some of these people I was very Juliana Hatfield. So
Yeah.
I could name every show now. But, you know, I got nervous, you know, talking to these people. But you once you start talking to them, though, like you said, it's like they're just people. They're just people.
They're just people. You've had some very, like, cool guests. You've had some groupies on, right?
Oh, my God. Cherry Vanilla.
Yeah.
I had Cherry Vanilla. You could think that Cola Breen is a groupie, but she's not. She's actually a sex worker.
Yeah, and
She was
sex
on my
workers
show.
as well.
She was really good. She was on 3 times, actually. During the pandemic, we talked a lot, and I decided it would be great to have her on the podcast, and she did it.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna ask, why do you feel those guests are interesting to your show?
Well, Cherry Vanilla, everyone found out why she was interesting because I can't remember everyone she said she slept with, but I remember 3 of them: David Bowie, Chris Christopherson, and Burton Cummings from the Guess Who. I mean, to me, that's a quality list right there.
That's a 3 for sure. That's intimidating. Imagine going into that relationship.
And she also confessed that the one man that she loved and wanted to sleep with the most that wouldn't sleep with her was Mick Ronson. I loved when she said that. And I went, me too. But, yeah, she was great. She was excellent. I tried to get more, but they're not easy to get. Like, my list of people that I've been trying to get is pretty long. You know, It's not easy to get. Some people just don't like podcasts. And I'm not going to mention any names, but one old rock star that wants to do my podcast doesn't know how to use Zoom, and he doesn't want to learn how to use Zoom. So I was like, that's all I'm doing right now is Zoom, you know?
Yeah, man.
I'm not a technical guy, you know.
I was only doing Zoom too, and it was Bobby Liebling who was like,
Pentagram.
Pentagram, who's like, I do not know how to use Zoom. We're not doing Zoom. So I had to screen record our Facebook Messenger FaceTime conversation. And
Screen record?
So I did it on my computer. I did a FaceTime call.
Yeah.
Because I was talking to him on Facebook
tape
Messenger.
FaceTime?
No, I had some software. And I had the software record
you're
my
too,
screen.
You're too smart, man. I'm not smart as you are.
But still, like, it was the most. And then I had to, in post, like, take my little window and then blow it up. It was quite an operation. But it's like, you know, it's some of my heroes. It's like I kind of have to.
Did I ever tell you that when I was at Giant and I was working, it was under the Dutch East India umbrella, and Barry from Dutch East came to me one day and he goes, I have a band. They want us to distribute their record, but they don't have a label or anything. Would you like to do it? It was Day of Reckoning, and I worked on that record, and I talked to Bobby a lot. I think he was a little out of it at that time of his life. This is around 87. And Pentagram is a lot bigger now than they were in 87.
Yeah, they were quite a mess back in the day. I think after the whole documentary came out, then it was kind of the whole Anvil effect, you know, where like they made a documentary about how rough the life of the band is and the singer and stuff.
That happens to a lot of bands.
Yeah.
The minute somebody decides to film it, you know, like Dig. Did you ever see the film Dig?
No.
It's about the Dandy Warhols and Brian Jonestown Massacre, and they filmed both of these bands in their early stages and what they were going through day to day. And the Dandies ended up getting a hit song. It was on a TV commercial. And
what song?
Brian Jonestown. Oh, you really put me on the spot there. I'd have to look that up. I don't have my laptop in front of me. I'm not a huge fan of I know the bands, but they're not like bands I listen to a lot. Brian Jonestown Massacre is a psychedelic band. They're good, but I can't tell you much about them or the Dandies. All I can tell you is I like the documentary. Just like I watched the Wilco documentary, and I love that. And I don't know much about Wilco either. I like, you know, I know the other dude, you know, went into, you know, I can't even tell. I don't even know what I was going to say. You know.
Well, I feel
Sunvault.
Sunvault.
Yeah. You know, they were in another band and they split up. One formed Wilco, one formed Sunvault. I'm not really a big fan of Wilco, but their documentary was great. Just like Metallica. I'm sorry to say this on your show, but I'm not a huge Metallica fan, but their documentary was amazing.
I was about to bring up, you know, you're talking about things you're not really like bands you might not be into, but you love the documentary. One of the worst metal albums ever made, Saint Anger, but the documentary, it's pretty much like Metal Memes, the movie, though, where it's like you can quote like every line of that fucking documentary. And then when they have Dave Mustaine on, and he's like, you know, no warning, no second chance. That's been quoted a million times.
You know, I really disliked. That's when my real dislike for James Hetfield started. I already thought that Lars was kind of like. But James Hetfield's bragging about shooting a bear, that really bugged me, man.
Was he on the?
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
He's like, I drank vodka and went out and I killed a bear. And I was like, you're bragging about that?
Yeah, well, like that band maybe had like some of the biggest egos in all of metal.
Yeah. It's funny, you know, now I listen to Hetfield talk and they seem like they've matured, you know. They seem a lot more mature than they used to be. So maybe I like them more now than they did. And, you know, I remember I was really interested when they did Turn the Page, and I wanted to find an interview of Seeger. And Seeger liked their version of Turn the Page. Made him a lot of money, actually, probably. Not that his version didn't make a lot of money. I'm sorry. I am virtually all over the map right now. So
it's all right, man. Well, that's like, you know, I feel like this whole episode, like I kind of wanted to be a little loose and just kind of shoot the shit.
We're loose, man. We're loose.
For sure, man. But yeah, it's so funny. Metallica, they literally were just added to Fortnite. I'm not sure if you know what Fortnite is.
I don't know much
But
about it.
it's like a kid's video game. It's
Oh,
ridiculous,
yeah,
you know.
video
Yeah,
game.
yeah.
Okay, I heard of it.
But yeah, man, you've had such a crazy life. You went to a Framingham State.
I did. I'm from Massachusetts. I grew up in Webster, Mass. And then I went to Quinsigamond Community College in Worcester for 2 years. And the only reason I went to Framingham, I was not a good student. I went to Framingham because they had a media program and a radio station. And that's all I was interested in. In fact, I moved into the dorm way early because they gave me that opportunity, and I was at that radio station every day in the vinyl room listening to music. That was 1981. And I was like, this is all I want to do is be around this.
Yeah, man. It's so funny how we had such similar origins, but in such different times. You know what I mean? Where like you had that and it was just kicking off, I feel. Like of course you had like the 70s after, and like you still had a bit of that. You know, going
college
around.
radio was really huge in the 80s too. It was a huge thing.
But it was so cool, man, because
90s
like
too.
in the 80s and 90s, like that was the place to find underground music or music that was pretty much gonna blow up. Where college radio now, except maybe a couple stations, is pretty much just trial runs to be on iHeartRadio or Sirius.
You know what's really crazy is back then, you needed to have all this experience or this degree or whatever to get the job you wanted. If you wanted to work for a record label and you came from college radio, you could get a job at a record label.
Yeah.
That's how it was back then. When I worked at A&M, especially in the alternative department, all of the guys there was mostly guys. It was weird. There were a few women too, but mostly guys. They all came from college radio. Every one of them.
Wow.
And they were the alternative department at A&M.
Now I feel like, because I did college radio, around 3
MLN.
years ago. Yeah, MLN.
I remembered. I was at DJM, WDJM.
Yeah. So like you weren't too far from my station. But literally, it was.
You mean on the dial? We were 91.3. Where were you?
91.5.
We were close.
Yeah, we were close.
Wow, real close.
Really, really close. But it was literally, man, like so I was the music department, and my whole thing was, let's get all these metal bands on the DAD, which was like, because it's just a big iPod. It's not vinyl anymore.
It wasn't like that when I was there.
It's just a big iPod where you click what song you want to play and it plays. So like my whole thing was I was burning CDs into it. I was downloading songs to be put on it because before it was just all pop. But I'm like, let's actually make this a real college station. I had some really, really obscure shit on there.
You know what we had, man? We had vinyl, 2 turntables, and a cart machine. It was like an 8-track. You'd record on it and stick that in. That's where all our PSAs and everything were on carts. And you could even put songs on there. In fact, I thought I was going to be a musician for a little while. And I actually recorded some stuff, and a few people played my songs on DJM. I remember one time I was in the cafeteria at Framingham State, and I heard this song I wrote playing on that. And I was like, oh, my God, that sounds horrible.
You still have these songs?
The reason that I didn't go, the reason I didn't become a musician.
You still have these songs?
Yeah,
I
do, but I'm not going to let you listen to it.
Yeah, man. So after that, how soon after graduating were you like, fuck it, I got to go to LA?
1983 was a very interesting summer for me because I finished Framingham State, didn't really even graduate. I was 1 credit short, and I was supposed to go and do this internship, and I didn't go up. A lot of people don't even know that. I don't even mention this because it's kind of embarrassing, actually, that I was 1 credit short. But you know what? This is what happened. I had to move back home because I couldn't figure out where to go and how to survive and what to do. And I didn't have a job. And I lasted a few months. And then I had some friends in California, and they were like, why don't you just move out here? We have a couch. And so I bought a 1-way ticket. Now, back then, you didn't fly a lot. So I never had been on a plane. So the first time I went on a plane was a one-way ticket. I remember
Across
I went
the country.
No, I went from Boston to LaGuardia, and then LaGuardia to LAX, and I'll never forget getting into LA in the middle of the winter. That's when I left at the end of '83 in the winter, and flying in and looking around and seeing nothing but one building after another, house after house, and then we go to the ocean and turn around. And I was like 22, 23 years old in complete awe. And I got so focused on getting a job that I got a job in 5 days when I was out there at Enigma. I went to the Enigma office and I walked in, and Kim Jones was the radio person I was talking to. And I walk in there, and there's like 6, 7, 8 people in this one room. I was expecting to walk into this big, it wasn't at all. It was this one room, and she's like, we don't have any jobs here. You're better off going to get a job in a mailroom at a major label. So I took 3 buses to get there. It was in Torrance, California.
Wow.
So I got back on the buses, went home, and I called the next place on my list. It was Greenworld Distribution, but I didn't know at the time that Enigma and Greenworld were the same company. So they give me the address. I'm like, 2896, I think it was, Western Avenue. I'm like, what? I was just there. And they're like, oh, Enigma is our parent company. And I'm like, you're kidding me. So the guy's like, well, come back down here and I'll interview you. It was Paul Murata, and he was the sales manager. And that job was selling records over the phone. So I went back down there, and he liked me, and he hired me. And I walked across the hall my first day into their office, and like, what are you doing here? Kim's like, I just got hired by Greenworld. Like, we work for the same company now. I guess there was a job here.
Yeah.
And before long, I was on the other side of the warehouse, and I was signing bands, and I wasn't. You didn't have just one job at Independent Label. My job was I dealt with all the distributors and sold them all our records to distribute. But you could bring bands in, and that's what I wanted to do. And I ended up signing a shitload of bands to Enigma, a lot.
So how soon after getting the job were you like signing bands?
About a year and a half.
Wow. That's crazy. And it's like, that's what, like, I feel like a lot of back in the day, like, even I wish it, like, now, you kind of just have to be persistent and, like, really, really go after it, instead of being like, all right, whatever, just turn around.
I was kind of lucky in a way, because I signed some the outlets from Boston, the neighborhoods from Boston, because I liked them. And then all of a sudden, I guess I have to tell you this story. A couple of girls that worked there kept giving me these flyers to this band.
Yeah.
And, they were putting them all over the walls and everything. And they kept talking, you got to come see them. I'm like, this band looks like a bunch of... I looked at them and I'm like, what is this, some New York Dolls ripoff band? Because that's what they look like. So finally, they were persuasive. In fact, one of them, Debbie Rogers, is still a good friend of mine, and I'm staying at her house in L.A. I'm going to house sit for her when she goes to Europe in September or October. But we're still friends. And this happened in 1984, okay? So I finally said I agreed to go to a show at the Troubadour. It was one of the rooms I hadn't been to yet, and I heard about it, and I was like, the Troubadour, it's a famous place. So I get there, and I look, and there's a line of women waiting to go in the bar. And I'm like, there's all women here. I swear to you, man. The place holds like 200 people, and I swear 180 of them were women. So I had guest list. She got me on the list. Like, A&R guy from Enigma is going to go come and check your band out. So the band is, by the way, Poison, okay? So I walk in, and I go upstairs to the balcony, and I was like, wow, the bunch of bands open I didn't know, but apparently Warrant was one of them, and there were a bunch of, I used to see like bands like Faster Pussycat, Warrant, Guns N' Roses did a lot of club dates, L.A. Guns, I saw them all the time. All these bands played clubs. Rat and Motley Crue had already jumped up a notch, and they didn't play those clubs as much because they had gotten signed by that point. So I'm in the balcony, and then they play it's a goth song comes on, and it was The Beauty of Poison. The band's on the tip of my tongue. They were a goth band. But the song The Beauty of Poison comes on, and then all of a sudden the lights go on, balloons, and the three guys rush to the front of the stage, and I was like, shit, these guys are pretty good. And, they sucked me in, and I went backstage after, met the whole band. Matt Smith was still the guitar player in the band. CeCe DeVille wasn't even there yet. So I hung around with them, and Bobby and I connected, which is odd because Ricky's the one I'm still friends with now. I haven't talked to Bobby. I saw Bobby 10 years ago, maybe. But Ricky and I went to Fenway Park to see Poison when they played with Motley Crue and Def Leppard, and I went and hung out with Ricky at his hotel room after. So I'm still friends with him.
Oh, wow.
So I talked to Bobby, and Bobby, they didn't have a manager yet. Vicky Hamilton was kind of their manager, but she was also on the way out. They had issues with her. She had this documentary come out recently where she's taking credit for everything, and I'm like, I texted Rick, and I'm like, did you see that? And he's like, don't mention her name to us, No. Glad we're documenting this. So I ended up spending, no lie, 6 months trying to convince everyone at Enigma to sign Poison, and no one wanted to sign them. Nobody. And every label passed on them. Finally, I was so persistent, and Bill Hine did an interview once, and he wrote, they asked, how did you get Poison? And he wrote, kind of ticked me off the way he worded. He goes, a guy that used to work here said he would quit if we didn't sign him. I was like, thanks for mentioning my name, Bill, but I got enough credit for it. I didn't care. Later, I was in all these magazines. So finally, we signed him for $20,000.
Wow.
$20,000. Okay, it ended up going up to 2,000 because Rick Brody, I believe was his name, he produced the first 8 songs, but it didn't have, there's something missing. Well, CeCe DeVille had 2 songs. He was now in the band now. He had 2 songs from his old band. Look What the Cat Dragged In and Talk Dirty to Me. So Ron Gowdy and Jim Faraci went in, they recorded those 2 songs. Look What the Cat Dragged In ended up being the title, and Talk Dirty to Me was their first hit. Cry Tough was the first single, but Talk Dirty to Me blew up, and then the ballad came, and that was it. History after that.
Wow. And now they're one of the biggest hair bands of all time.
By the way, that $22,000 budget resulted in $4 million in sales. We didn't even have the band long. Capitol kind of scooped them up, man, right from us. We were an independent label. We had this distribution deal, and next thing you know, once Capitol got involved, we had nothing to do with Poison anymore. In fact, I was gone by the time Poison exploded, but when they came to New York and I was working at Roadrunner, I got to go to the Madison Square Garden show, and they opened for Rat, and then I went backstage, and we made it, man. I'm hanging out with the band, and Ricky Rocket introduces me to his parents, and it made my day. He goes, if it wasn't for this guy, we wouldn't be here. And I was like, wow, that's the greatest thing that's ever happened. I had a King Diamond shirt on, and I showed up backstage at Madison Square Garden.
Well,
Anyways,
I hope the label gave you a pretty big fruit basket
Nothing.
for doing that.
I got nothing for Poison.
I can't believe you signed Poison. That's so
I can't either. For a few years afterwards, I never even told anyone. You
Dude,
know?
it's so wild, man. Because I remember the first time I hung out was the first time you were on my show, and we were talking about demos, and I think you shocked the whole panel when you're like, "Yeah, I signed one of the
it's
biggest
really
hair bands of all time."
It's weird. You don't like to brag, although I think I just bragged for like the last 15 minutes.
I kind of asked,
Well, I mean, I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of a lot of other my signings too. But that one, you know what it is? It's like the New York Dolls record, Too Much, Too Soon. That's what happened to me, man. I signed this band, and then how do you get? I never signed another band as big as them again. The Great Cat. Dag Nasty, Verbal Assault,
Verbal Assault's great, man. And of course, like INC.
Indestructible
is
Noise.
great.
I'm really proud of those signings at Giant. I think all those bands at Giant, Uniform Choice, Dag Nasty, Verbal Assault, Government. I'm proud that I signed all those bands. INC was interesting too because a lot of people thought they were just like a Metallica ripoff band. Oh, they sound like Testament a little bit, you know. And people,
Connecticut band.
yeah.
Yeah.
But we had two great records while I was there before the label went, you know. But those two records were great, the self-titled and the Visitor.
Yeah,
Visitor made it to top 10 metal radio. Top 10 metal radio.
Amazing band. So you signed Poison. How soon after that did you switch labels? Did you do another label in LA and then go to New York?
No, it was under Enigma. See, we had the Metal Blade label at that time too, and then we started Restless. I started Restless Records. I actually came up with the name, and Scott Vanderbilt and I signed it. They thought, you know, we're going to be doing our bigger releases, Striper, Poison, and Smithereens through Capitol. You're better suited for the more punk and indie stuff. And I agreed at the time. So I moved to the next room, and I ran Restless. But then I got really fed up with everything and in L.A., and all of a sudden somebody gave my name to Case Wessels, and he came to L.A. and stole me from Enigma, and I moved to New York.
Yeah. How do you reflect on your time in New York?
Working for Roadrunner was one of the worst experiences of my life. I signed two bands to Roadrunner, but they were really difficult to work for. They were in Amsterdam, the Great Cat, and the Neighborhoods to the Emergo. I started there's a couple of rough stories for me there. I had Heathen signed, but the night before they were going to sign their deal, Combat stole them from us.
Didn't their Combat's lawyer call
Ronnie
you?
Montrose produced that record, and I had signed Ronnie to a deal at Enigma, and Ronnie's the one that hooked me up with Heathen. And I had the deal all done and everything, but Important, Combat, Relativity, whatever they were called, stole the band, right? And I had to tell Case Wessels the next day, and he was pissed. And I was not just pissed, but embarrassed. But Gangrene was the other band that I started the ball rolling on, but I never got it finished, and then they signed with Roadrunner after I left.
Well, didn't you do like backing vocals on like a Gangrene record?
I wouldn't call them vocals. I'm on 3 songs, but I'm doing gang vocals.
Yeah.
Whoa! That's all I did with one song was whoa! And then Suspect Device, it was a Stiff Little Fingers cover, and then the Job song. I can't remember how it goes now. I'm good friends with Chris Doherty, though. Chris and I are very good friends.
So I love Chris. It was Brian Slagle who stole you back brought you back.
Yeah,
to
well,
LA?
no. What happened was after I was done with Roadrunner, after about a year, I got fired actually. But Case Wessels gave me a month to find another job, and I had 2 labels. I had Combat, Relativity, and I had Dutch East India, which was starting a new label, and they were like, this will be your label. So I went and met with all the guys at Important. They were much bigger because they had Mega Force. They were much bigger than Dutch East, but I don't know why I took Dutch East over them.
Wow.
And because I could have my own label, and he said, you got free reign, sign who you want. He gave me the money I needed to sign the bands, and that only lasted like 2 years. And then I went to L.A., and I decided to go visit Brian Slagle. And I went over to their offices in Sherman Oaks, and I'm walking around, and I'm like, this place is great. One thing about Metal Blade, and don't think I'm a sexist for saying this, but they had all these beautiful women working there, and they had all these, and then they had the guys. It was the guys and all the beautiful women, and I was like, you walk in, and Mookie's the receptionist, and she's like drop dead gorgeous. I'm like, I could work here every day. So I'm walking around. I didn't think I could work there at that time. We're walking around, and Brian says, come in this office with me. He drags me in this office. I'm like, the empty office. He goes, come work for me, and you can have this office. And I'm like, you serious? Like, yeah. He goes, let me know if you're interested, and I'll get you an offer. So I call him. I'm interested. And all of a sudden, a couple days later, I'm at work. I come home, and there's a message on the answering machine with every detail of what he would give me.
Wow.
And I'm like, I'm going back to L.A. I've had enough of this. Because Giant was located Dutch East Indian, Long Island, which I don't care is one of the most dreadful places you could live. I don't even want to visit Long Island, never mind work there. So I went back. And next thing you know, I'm working on Ventura Boulevard for Metal Blade Records. This is the best way I've told my story yet, by the way. Thank you. And
I'm honored.
And then when I got to Metal Blade, Brian just said, "These are your bands. Make them happen." It was Lizzie Borden, Fates Warning, DRI, Bitch. You know, she had Betsy. It had become Betsy at that time. She went by Betsy. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
And then, Candlemass came in, and Intruder, which I loved. I was their product manager. And Eviction was the only band I actually signed to Metal Blade. They're a Pittsburgh band. Didn't really happen, but they were really big in Pittsburgh. And then UFO, got to hang out with Phil Mogg. That was great.
Armored Saint, right?
Sorry, John, Joey, and the boys. Armored Saint was one of the big bands. It was weird when Brian pretty much wanted me to really focus. Armored Saint was kind of in a lull period at the time. They had just been on Chrysalis, and they were going to come back. They hadn't come back. Symbol of Salvation was when they came back. So it was a little later. But as far as Master of Disguise goes, Lizzie, I worked my ass off on that record.
Wow.
Perfect Symmetry, Fates Warning, DRI, Dealing with It. Those were records I ain't misbehaving.
Great albums.
Princess Pang, I worked on that record. Worked with them for a while.
Nice.
You know what? I'm sure I'm leaving bands out because we put out like 8 releases a month there, so it's impossible for me to remember every band without.
And that's
having
just
notes.
one label, too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We had a huge schedule. Like every month, it was like eight releases almost every single month.
Wow.
It's a lot of work.
I know you told me that because I've had Betsy Bitch on the show.
Love Betsy.
And you said you had interest, but I know.
Don't say everything I said about Betsy, please. You're going to get me in trouble.
But you two had a history.
I love you, Betsy, if you're listening.
That's all you want to comment on it?
Oh yeah, well, yes.
You said you're like before you started, you're like, listen, man, I'm totally an open book here. I found it. I found the wall.
I can't really talk about that because it's kind of like I don't want to.
Well, I respect it. I
can't
push.
talk about it.
Yeah, I won't push, but I do find that.
I think everyone already knows already because of the way you presented it.
But yeah, man, that's such a great label. And then after that, you stayed in L.A., right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, so we're done with Metal Blade. What happened at Metal Blade was...
I feel like you covered a lot of it.
There was a lawyer that Metal Blade had, and we didn't get along very well, and he just irritated me more and more and more, and I just couldn't deal with it anymore. And then this guy, Bud Scarpa, who worked for Hitsmat, I regret it now because let me just go on record and say that Brian Slagle's the best guy I ever worked for.
For sure. And
I feel bad that I left Metal Blade. I feel bad about what happened, but I feel like I made a contribution while I was there, and my time came that I had to leave, and I did. And then I got a job, and I made way more money than I ever made. My next two, there was Third Stone Music first. Michael Douglas, the actor, started a publishing company and a label, and somehow I ended up working there. And I made a lot of money, and I signed a bunch of writers to deals, but one band, The Neighborhoods, which went through Third Stone Atlantic, and I was in the position where I got to decide whether we should sign Saigon Kick or not, because Atlantic wanted Saigon Kick, but they didn't want to sign them directly to Atlantic. They said, we can let you sign to a subsidiary. So I remember I went down to Fort Lauderdale with Dick Rudolph, my boss and I saw them and I gave the thumbs up. Let's do it. And we signed them, But I love Jason Bieler, but their singer was a total dick. He did some really stupid things, man. The other guys were out in the band. Jason Bieler is a great guy. I don't have a bad thing to say about him. But, they had a gold record. We had a gold record. And then their next record didn't happen as much. But they still have a following. I guess Jason still does a lot of stuff.
I'd say
They're
do.
a cool band.
Yeah.
But, that's what I thought my job was going to be there. But then after I left Third Stone, the label ended up going away. It was like a tax write-off from Michael Douglas. It didn't really go anywhere. They never signed. Nona Gay was who they signed, Marvin Gaye's daughter, but didn't happen.
Wow. So Third Stone, how soon after Metal Blade were you like? Because it seems like it was just instantly you were in another label.
It's funny. I used to think that if you worked at a lot of places and you didn't last very long, that it didn't look on in your resume, but that's not the case at all. It's better. It was better for me. I averaged about 3 years at Enigma, but two. A&M was the longest for me, and Roadrunner was the shortest at 1 year. But usually around 2 years, the other three, and then A&M I was with for like 7 years.
Yeah. So A&M. At what point did you start working for A&M?
Well, when Third Stone, when I realized that was another, you have to understand, I was still really young through all this stuff, so I look back and I feel like I hastily made some decisions I shouldn't have, but you can't have regrets about what you do. I don't have any regret. You know what my big regret was?
You were in your 20s, right?
Yeah. My big regret, well, by the time I got to Metal Blade, I was in my 30s, but my biggest regret was leaving Enigma to go to Roadrunner. Now, I don't regret signing the Gray Cat because I'm proud of it, even though a lot of people can't stand her. I was happy I signed her.
Yeah.
But that's my one big regret. And a smaller regret after that would be Metal Blade. So I don't have a lot of regrets, but those two I do. Going the Roadrunner and leaving Metal Blade.
Yeah. Well, I feel like everything, even though it was like 2 years here, 2 years there, I feel like it was still moving so fast.
The way I got to A&M was because of Metal Blade, and I'll tell you why. When we were there, Mike Faley, who was Billy Sheehan's manager, who was also the VP at Metal Blade, he worked out a deal where we would work all these records, my staff would, to independent record stores and college radio and stuff. So all these labels were bringing us projects. We had Little Caesar, Circus of Power, I can't remember all of them, but the big ones that we got were Jane's Addiction, Soundgarden.
Wow.
Jane's Addiction and Soundgarden, Mother Love Bone. That was my greatest thing to happen to me at Metal Blade. So I met Stone and Jeff when they were in Starman, Andrew Wood. I met all those guys, and I worked on their EP, and but Soundgarden, who Bad Motorfinger, the prelude to that, we worked. Brian Huttenhauer, the A&R guy, I got to know him. So one night, I was out in a club in L.A., and I was at Third Stone, and I met Brian Huttenhauer. And I told him about what was going on. He's like, I might have something for you. And I'm like, really? So I went and met with him, and he said, how about an A&R consultant job? You can find bands, listen to all my tapes, and you can bring them to the Studio C at A&M Studios, a famous place, and you can do demo deals. So I took that job as an A&R consultant, and I was bringing all these bands. Joey Vera I did demos with, Down by Law, this band called Roach Factory from Lawrence. None of my bands got signed, but Brian one day, after about a year doing that, says, I want you to come to a meeting with me in the marketing department. So he brings me in the marketing department, introduces me, and he's like, we don't have any metal presence at all here, but we got Damn the Machine now, and Paw, and Therapy, and Monster Magnet, and we need somebody to work on these bands. This is the guy. And I'm like, okay. So Jim Guillermo, who was Social Distortion's manager, who was the head of the marketing department, I met with him, and they said, how about if we start you off half here and half A&R? And I'm like, but we'll double your salary. And I'm like, all right. So I started working there, and before long, they wanted me full-time in marketing. So that's when I had to go to New York. It's like
Back to
we
New
got this
York.
director of marketing job, but you got to move to New York. So I went to New York and hated it, but I lasted there for a few. I got robbed actually in New York, and that's when I said I'm leaving. Well, I didn't get robbed. I got burglarized. I was out all day, and someone cleaned my apartment out. So my boss said, "How would you like to go work in Boston at the Polygram office?" And my last couple of years at A&M, I spent in Boston, and that's how I ended up back in Boston. Whew.
Wow.
You probably have questions about A&M, but
Yeah,
I
well,
kinda-
also, Chris Poland.
Yes.
That was, and being on tour with him.
6 weeks I went on the road with Dan the Machine. It was one of the best things I did at that label. Got to know all those guys. Dave Randy, whose father, Don Randy, was in the Wrecking Crew, the famous Wrecking Crew that backed up, played on all these great songs by the Beach Boys and all these bands. That was his father. And Dave Clemens, the singer, really cool dude. He's in Germany now. And the Poland brothers, Chris and Mark. And I got to know Chris really well. And it was great being on the road with Chris Paul. Every night people showed up with Megadeth records for him to sign. They all wanted to meet. And the tour was great because Voivod was the headliner. So it was Voivod and Dan the Machine, 6 weeks hanging out with those dudes, man. It was fantastic.
Legendary musicians,
Yeah.
especially Voivod, fantastic band. What year are we
94?
talking? 94.
94.
Wow. So there was still some Voivod still putting out great records, and they still, even their current stuff is fantastic. I think.
Piggy and oh my God, I can't remember the singer's name. Piggy's no longer with us. Well, two of the guys in the band, I would take the band out to Damn Machine, the record stores and stuff, and they're like, "Can we go?" Because there was no MCA rep on the road. It was just me. This girl Debbie did end up coming out there after a while, but it was mostly me. And those guys would come, like the heavy metal shop we went to, and all these record stores, and they'd come to the dinners. I had an A&M credit card that I was like flashing left and right. Spent a fortune, man.
Are there any favorite memories or highlights from that tour that stand out to you? Touring with a thrash metal band, and
every day
Megadeth.
was a lot of fun, and I met a lot of people on the road then that I'm still friends with. I got to know so many cool people being on the road for that long, and I think one of my really good memories was Inger Laurie, who was in the band called the Nymphs that was on Geffen. Her and I were friends. I wanted to sign them to Metal Blade, but they weren't the right fit, and they ended up signing with Geffen. The same guy that signed Motley Crue and Guns N' Roses signed the Nymphs.
Wow.
Tom Zutat. And so I went and saw her when I was in New Jersey, and I said, "Hey, why don't you come to the show?" So Inger, who was a reformed heroin addict just like Chris, I took her to the show, and I introduced her to Chris, and they knew, and they spent an hour talking to each other because they were both had recovered from heroin, and to me it was beautiful. And Dan the Machine's manager Janie was like, "That was so cool that they got to meet each other."
Wow.
And then other things would happen, like different bands would show up, and I'm having a mental block at different shows just to meet Chris, because he knew everybody and everyone loved him. It was
legendary
all good.
Legendary guitarist.
It's funny. I have a lot of this documented, and I'm working on a book, and it's all documented. So you have to read the book.
You'll have to read the book. So after that, at what point did you kind of step away from the labels and the whole
at the right
kinda
time
industry? Yeah,
at the right time, because
so it was
literally a year after I left, A&M laid off their entire staff, and I was like, wow. I decided I wanted to manage bands. I was in Boston. I could not stand working at the Polygram office. They treated me like shit.
Did they?
And I couldn't stand there were some people I liked there, but most of the higher-ups didn't want me there. They were threatened because I'd go to Strawberry's office in Newbury Comics. They didn't want me I'd go to BCN with band. They didn't want me around. They
was
wanted
Tower
to be the
still
star.
going at that
point?
point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had some great one in-store I'll never forget with Suzanne Vega at Tower. I worked with a lot of different kinds of bands at A&M, not just when I became the marketing guy after doing the metal thing, I Cheryl Crow, Suzanne Vega, Blues Trout, Dishwaller I was on the road with a lot. I did a lot of other types of Patty Griffin. So I was like doing a lot of different things.
Yeah. Do you know Rob Walsh?
Rob
He was the
Walsh.
manager of Tower Records. I've had him on my show. He runs a record store called Cheap Thrills Music.
Jill, I
in
knew
Dedham.
the people I knew at Jill was who I knew. Jill Parton and Mike Casey. Those were the ones I knew at Tower.
I have to.
Jill and Mike. You must.
I
know
got to
Mike
introduce
Casey.
the two. Yeah, I do. I got to introduce you to Rob. You two.
I might. You
might
say,
already know him.
You might say, "Oh yeah, I remember you." I mean, that happens a lot, man.
So you started managing bands.
Yeah, I did.
So that's nothing you really do anymore, right? You're more focused on the pod.
I did it for like 18 years.
Yeah. How do you reflect on that?
Well, I didn't have any bands get. There was a bad time, man. It was 2000 to like 2018 or 99 to 2016. It was a bad time, but I had great bands. Love Me Nots, Go-Go Girls, Cage Teeth, The Charms, Continental, Vulgarity. I managed all those bands at different levels and different times. Stone Soul Foundation. They were a metal band. You would have liked them. Stoner rock band. But I had a lot of success with The Charms and the Love Me Nots, and some with the Go-Go Girls, but mostly it was nickel and diming my way through life.
So you went back to your roots, because I feel like podcasting is like pretty much the future of radio, I think.
In 2018, I think it was, I was working. When my management company ended, I took all these random jobs, and I ended up helping this guy, Zach, open up Baby Loves Tacos in Pittsburgh. And he would talk to me every day about, you got to start a podcast. He's the one that talked me into it. So January 2019, I did my first show. I did the first 6 episodes actually in Pittsburgh, and then I moved back to Boston right before the pandemic. Bad timing, but I kept it going, and here I am, 317 episodes.
How
later.
long were you in Pittsburgh for?
5 years.
5 years. Wow.
I went out there to work for an independent label, and that did not work out.
What label?
Get Hip Records.
Get Hip.
They weren't very hip. They're still around, but we didn't see eye to eye, man.
Well, I feel like, opposed to like the 80s, the industry, because I was telling you too, like, right now, just the job market and everything's such a mess. And I was telling you, I am interested in like working with labels, like getting into that industry, but I assume it's changed so.
Like
it
that
is
laugh.
like,
That was a maniacal laugh. You want to go work for a record label?
that was quite the evil laugh.
Well, that's because I don't really know how you're gonna find a job, but there are some labels. Mike Gitter, my buddy, he works Century Media.
You recommended me Century Media because
yeah,
it's
I would talk to
that,
Gitter. Gitter would be,
it's
publicly saying this. Maybe Gitter will hear it.
It's something that like I am kind of interested in, because like
Brian
I do
too. Talk to Brian Slagle.
Yeah, because I do love like working with bands and like the whole like we're at the store I work at or used to work at, I guess. So
Can we say the name?
Yeah, the Nevermind
Nevermind.
Shop. Also, Nevermind Shop, Upton, Massachusetts.
You know what? You want to hear something crazy?
Like the Monkeys.
I'm driving over here, and I have my different playlists on, and all of a sudden the Neighborhoods come on, and Dave Minahan's from Upton, and it came on right when I was in Upton. I'm like, wow, really cool, man. The Neighborhoods I worked with for a long time. I signed them to 3 different labels.
Oh,
I
really?
love the Neighborhoods. If you know the Hoods, you love the Hoods.
I'll have to check them out. You also didn't you work with like? Did you? I'm not sure if you worked with, or because did you have anyone from Slapshot on your podcast?
Oh yeah, I've had all the guys from Slapshot. I
Yeah.
never worked with them, but I know all them. There's a new band now called The Long Wait, and it's members of Slapshot, SSD Control, and Wrecking Crew, and Daryl Shepard, who's in the band Kind, which is a great stoner rock band. I highly recommend that you check out. Yeah, those guys are great.
Yeah.
But I never signed them or anything like that. It was more like friends.
Yeah.
I'm friends with a lot of bands.
I can tell.
A lot of bands.
And I'm honored to call you my friend, man.
You are. You're
Thank
my
you so
friend.
much for doing this podcast. Really
My
appreciate
pleasure,
it.
dude. I loved it.
Hell yeah. Well, go subscribe and follow Blowing Smoke with Twisted Rico. You want to plug some shit?
We're on all the same places as this podcast. I'm pretty sure Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, YouTube. Blowing Smoke with Twisted Rico. Subscribe, rate, join the Patreon page, patreon.com/Twisted Rico.
What's it, $2?
$100 minimum a month. Yeah, it's only $1 actually to sign up.
Just $1. I'd recommend it.
I just want to say this to your listeners. You're doing an excellent job. You're getting great guests. I love your podcast. Keep it going. I can't wait to see how you do in California. I'll be out there checking up on you in the fall. And thank you for this opportunity.
Well, I guess we'll have to do a part 2 across the country.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I'm Brandon Battick.
It won't rain there. It never rains in Southern California.
Yeah, it will never rain there for sure. Oh, Jesus Christ, man. I'm literally drenched right now. We were supposed to do this shit outside. But hey, I feel like this is fitting. The black light basement room of a record store.
Fitting that I'm sitting next to a Duran Duran poster, but it's okay.
We'll get you a different poster next time.
Thanks.
I'm Brandon Battick, and this is Disturbing the Priest.